So we're gonna get started for the second conversation and chat today. And I'm really excited and thankful for Cryobio being here, supporting today's conference symposium. Again, I'm using symposium, making it more comfortable and accessible in terms of how we do it. We're really thankful for the continued engagement and support that you've shown Family Parenthood Pathway to Family Symposium for the last several years. I think as we think about pathways to parenthood, probably for a lot of queer men, that's normally the first place we start thinking of assisted reproductive pathway. But we also know that that's not only for queer men or male identified folks. We know that a lot of our lesbian community may have issues with infertility or just the challenges of making a child inside of a womb is not that easy. And I think we take that for granted. And I think the opportunity today to spend a little time talking about what that pathway looks like, the challenges, the risks, the joy, the enjoyment of what comes on the other side of that, hopefully 9 months, but sometimes a little longer in this particular process. So I want to give the opportunity for everyone to introduce themselves. I always like to give that power to people. So maybe we'll start with, I don't think I did Carly. Yeah, start with you. So we'll kick it off with Carly in this case.
I'm Carly with Cryobio, and I'm the Experience Integration Director at the company. And Robin and I joke, our father founded the company almost 33 years ago. I've been with it for about 6 years. Robin's been with it for over a decade. Yes, ma'am. But we say we've been with it our entire lives. Being able to watch our father grow the company and seeing the compassion and the care that he put towards individuals that were trying to conceive children with donor sperm has been really motivating and inspiring. And we're just happy to be a part of the program. Yeah.
I'm Robin Baird. I'm with Cryobio. As Carly said, I've been working here about a decade. I love doing events like this because I love seeing people that have come to us to form their families. And I love some of the joy that brings, and also answering questions, hoping to dispel any myths that are out there.
My name is Matthew Putnam, I'm the Director of Laboratory Operations at Cryobio. I just joined in March. I've been in the field for about a decade now, helping people build families. And I came to Cryobio from Reproductive Gynecology, which also has a local office. That's what
Dr. Jane. I'm AJ Jane, and I'm a fertility doctor. We have a fertility center in Westerville, which is only 20 minutes from here on a Sunday when there's no traffic.
Yeah.
Obviously Cryobio has been in town for a long time. They predate when I came here back in 2013, right around time when Matt joined our office, actually. So happy to be here. I think this is like my 6th or 7th year coming to this symposium. So I've got to know Hannah over time and got to meet Bill today, but it's a great, the venue, even though it's changed over time, has only gotten better and better. So I think going from an elementary school to was it the
chairs are the best.
Yeah. The child would lead to here and having your very own, beautiful venue is fantastic. So looking forward to a good discussion today.
Well, thank you all for being here. I mean, I think just you already acknowledged, thank you for the work that you've done, prior to this particular moment. While I think our attention to talk about these issues in the public space for the LGBTQ community is only relatively recent and new, clearly we have had this pathway for quite some time to be able to bring our families together. So I guess my first sort of question is, what is assisted reproduction? Like, what is this thing?
Maybe I'll be the first to start. These guys will probably clean up my mess though. So assisted reproduction is just a general term, right? So whether it's a traditional family with a man or a woman and who's trying to conceive, or a same-sex couple where it's 2 women who might need donor sperm, or like you started out when it's 2 men who are trying to start a family and they have the sperm, maybe more sperm that's even needed for the process, but you don't have eggs, you don't have a carrier, right? So all the processes involved, whether it's intrauterine insemination or IVF, where we actually stimulate whether it's an egg donor or the female partner to get eggs, then fertilize those eggs with sperm, and then someone has to carry, whether it's one of two women, or if it's two men, they would have to have a gestational carrier, or a surrogate, as some people call it. So that entire process is assisted reproduction.
That's a very good answer, I think,
Yeah.
very complete. I know there's different tiers to it, right? So you talked about IVF, you talked about intrauterine insemination. So for same-sex female couples, really the front line of defense would be the intrauterine insemination, I would say. It's a lot easier, it's a lot less invasive, and it's a lot less costly to the patients as well. So for same-sex female couples, really IUI is intrauterine insemination is where you want to start with donor sperm. And in regards to donor sperm, this can be anonymous sperm that Cryobio provides, but Cryobio also provides directed donor services, which means if you have a very close friend that you would like to use their sperm because they're your friend, you've known them their whole life, you love them, you want them to be a part of your family building experience, we can use your friend's sperm, we can clear it through the FDA, we can put it through all these various processes and grow your family to be inclusive of your friend network as well. So there are just many options that you can choose that along this pathway. So, we're always here on the back end for support, and Dr. Jane is always there on the front line. So for this clinic.
I think there's something really cool you can do if you're a lesbian couple. You can do reciprocal IVF, which you can have one partner's egg and you fertilize the egg, and then the other partner can carry it, which is really cool. You both get to be involved, hands-on that way. Yeah.
So you all highlighted, a variety of options in terms of the path. Within the queer community, I think in particular, and this is probably more of an interest question, do we find that there seems to be one path that has been more predominantly used by people in the queer community, whether that be queer lesbian couples or but have you seen that there's sort of a path that seems to be a clearer with a lot of couples dealing with?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, donor sperm IUI is probably like Matt said, the first line of defense. It's the most common, I'd say probably by a 10-to-1 ratio for several reasons. Number one, obviously cost, right? Cost of doing an intrauterine insemination is going to be much less than doing IVF, which is 10 to 20,000, depending on what you have to do. And also, with donor sperm, it's readily available. So places like Cryobio have a wide variety of donor sperm options based on race and color of hair and I mean everything, right? So you can really find the donor that you want. These guys can speak more to that, and it is readily available. I want to go back to Matt mentioned directed sperm donor. So somebody that So sometimes it's a situation where you may have two women, but they may have a friend, it might be the brother of the woman who's not getting inseminated, obviously, right?
Yeah.
And they can act as a directed sperm donor. Historically, that's always been a big headache for me because when you follow those FDA guidelines to use that sperm, it's a whole drawn out process. But having Cryobio in town allows me to say, okay, great, we're going to send you over there. And they have all these protocols in place to quickly do it and not do like the big 6-month wait that I've had to do in the past myself. So, but going back to your question, donor sperm IUI, at least for two women trying to have a baby is the main way to go. Unfortunately for men, there's really only one way, which is donor egg and gestational carrier.
So you sort of highlighted quickly that some of the costs. I think one of the things, when we step into this space, we hope our families are really thoughtful and intentional about it. It's not a whoopsie baby. This is a plan thing. And I think the place that I don't know that we often think about, if we are thinking about sort of the cost, is the legal consideration. I've had friends who have had to travel outside of state to consider who their gestational carrier would be, and legal ramifications of a donor egg from Florida to Texas to what are some specific to the state of Ohio? Are there any challenges in relation to some of those sort of aspects of surrogacy and enriched fertilization reproduction that we need to be thinking about as we are in this state, that you are aware of that pop up right away?
I mean, I would personally be nervous doing it anywhere right now.
Mm.
I think Hannah, I'm sure you're gonna talk about that.
No, it's not your legal. Go ahead.
I don't do parenting stuff. Ohio's not a bad state necessarily. You know, surrogacy is allowed here. In some states it's not allowed. You know,
That's not something I even knew, so.
yeah,
Wow.
I mean, I think there might only be 1 or 2 states now. I think, New York maybe used to not allow compensated surrogacy, but they just switched that a year or 2 ago. So that was really good because New York's obviously a big state for that. So.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Mm.
It's a big IVF state. You know, I think the most important thing to do is get an attorney. I mean, do it first, probably, before you do anything else, really. I wouldn't bring one in at the end. Obviously, if you have to, do it then, but get an attorney, let them walk you through it. You're taking all this time and all this money, you really want to protect your family that you're creating.
I think that's excellent advice, you know, and to be proactive about it, to do it from the very beginning. I mean, it's easy for us from the clinical side or the laboratory side to talk about those things all day, but really in the background of all of that is legally securing your family. And I think it's your first step before you contact Cryobio for donor sperm, Dr. Jade for an appointment would be to contact an attorney and seek their advice, someone who's specialized in this field, which there are many in Ohio and all around the country. So it is a service that's available and something that we very, very much encourage you to do.
And it's really frustrating because it adds an extra level of expense on something which is already expensive. But it's worth doing.
It's more frustrating when you didn't do it.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
you're compensated surrogate goes
Exactly.
to California or what.
Yeah, and it's more expensive if you don't do it ahead of time. I mean, you can pay, I don't know what these are, probably a couple $1,000s versus like, I don't even know how much it would be to continue fighting with somebody. And have a contract, if you're using a known donor, I think that's a wonderful option to do, but definitely have a contract for that. With donor sperm, the law, it cuts off parentage with him, you don't have to worry about that, but you do need to establish both of your parentage with the child. Are you guys recommending adoption still, second parent adoption?
So.
Yeah.
I'm attorney Hannah Bacadoni. So if you are a lesbian couple that uses a known donor but has a contract and allows a medical intermediary to perform the insemination, not the bottle of wine at home situation that sometimes TV says is short. If the medical intermediary, these lovely individuals, sever that parental right to the sperm donor who has given up his right to anything that happens to his sperm down the line. If you use that process, go through it, your wife becomes pregnant, then what we suggest is what's called a second parent determination. That's something we do here in Franklin County through the juvenile court, which also establishes parentage and child support, which has been around since time immemorial because straight people, as has been mentioned, have been having children this way in a while. So the second parent determination just says that yes, you're the parent, and sir, you are not. But it says that in a much more legally fun way. And so we have to submit an affidavit, we have to submit a judgment entry. In Franklin County, it's a walkthrough hearing, you don't have to go to court. They said, yeah, you did the work, good job, but you have to do the work. Otherwise, you're going through a step parent adoption, which is what we call it here in Franklin County, because second parent adoptions aren't a thing.
Oh.
And your spouse who did not carry the child has to wait a year and then adopt the child, have a caseworker come to your home, make sure you're a good parent. You have to go to court, pay them $500 for the privilege, and then they say, yeah, that baby, you made that choice. So do the work first. There's other stuff to be done, contracts, power of attorney.
I have a question. So if somebody, I don't do parentage law at all. So if somebody is forming their family in Ohio,
Sure.
is that enough then? Like, say they would move to, I don't know, Missouri, like 5 years down the line?
Yeah.
Are you recommending to go through the step parent adoption thing at some point?
So here's the thing.
Because I've heard both
Yeah,
sides.
the probate court in Franklin County says if you're on the birth certificate, you're the parent, congratulations.
Okay.
The Franklin County juvenile court says, birth certificate is just a record keeping document, it can be corrected and changed, just like a marriage certificate. These are all certificates, as we call them, with legal permission. They don't mean anything to be prosecuted. However, we have the most originalist constitutional court of the Supreme Court we've had ever in the century of our life with me, thank you God. But even they recognize the full faith and credit clause of the Constitution says that there is an entry in a state, all states are going to recognize it because it's bureaucratically simple. So if you have an entry from a court with a judge's signature saying you are the legal parent, it might be worthwhile before going to Missouri. Unless you really enjoy that birth certificate. But again, it's a rebuttable presumption. And with same-sex couples, it's rebuttable from existence. So do the work. Hi, Dr. Baird. This is Dad.
Yeah. Dr. Baird over there.
Yeah.
Oh, hey guys.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Well,
I ran the marathon this morning.
You better learn. Yeah. Yeah. So he went to the marathon conversation. For the
But Denzel did,
Denzel.
thank you.
I call him Denzel too, this guy.
you can pass for Denzel. So, these guys bring up really good points. We've had, I'm sure we can all speak to different stories where legal things came to light later. I actually had a situation where number one, we talk about different states, as conservative as Ohio is, and as unfriendly as it can be in some ways, especially for women's health and reproduction, it's remarkably open when it comes to gestational carriers and surrogacy, which is great, right? So when I practiced in Jersey, we get a lot of people coming in from New York because it was not legal at the time in New York. They didn't come to us for surrogacy. But I had a situation where a gestational carrier conceived with IVF with a recipient couple's traditional couple with their embryo. And she ended up moving from Ohio to West Virginia halfway through the pregnancy because of her husband's job. And so she delivered in West Virginia. And I remember when the judge who was trying to figure this out in West Virginia called me, and he was like, I'm gonna guess this guy's probably in his mid to upper 60s. And he's like, so doctor, you're trying to tell me that the baby that this woman had is actually not her baby. Baby, right? And so we had to supply it was, I thought this would be like open shut, like,
Did you see a photo, like a post-it?
yeah, right. Yeah, but to their point, that's why it's so important to have these things sort of ironclad beforehand, because people can move and things can change, whatever, so.
And we're happy to work with you, whatever paperwork you need, we do that all the time.
Yeah.
Just let us know.
It's such an interesting reflection of our legal system here in the States. We're not going to get deep into it because that's a whole other conversation that I'm going to do for today. Maybe that'll be our next symposium. I sort of jokingly said at the very beginning of this, a 9-month process, maybe a little bit longer. What we are talking about a month process, what we're talking about is reproductive sort of process. How do I say this without sounding trite? Who would say beginning to end? What could someone's timeline look like? If anyone want to take a stab at that, or what has been the fastest you've seen? You're getting point finger at you.
It all depends on the circumstance, right? So if it's donor sperm, you could literally, meet your fertility doctor on a Monday and already have done your homework. You could go to the Cryobio website and find a sperm donor of your choice, or, it's not just Cryobio, there's sperm banks over the country, you have to pay shit, and these guys are local. So, you can find, I have patients come in that we've already chosen a sperm donor, we're ready to go, then great, if your next period, we can go ahead and start you on, a low dose of fertility medicine that's usually very expensive, and your IUI is literally on day 13, 14 of that cycle. So it could be literally within 2 to 3 weeks of meeting your doctor. Obviously, if you're going to do something like reciprocal IVF that Robin mentioned, maybe like a month or two planning ahead. And when you're doing, a donor egg, if a male couple is doing donor egg with a gestational carrier, usually Unless if you've taken care of everything coming in, and that happens when people say, yep, his sister is gonna be the sperm donor, or his sister's gonna be the carrier. Yeah, I mean, it's all like ready to go, and that can move fairly quickly, but you're still looking about 6 to 8 weeks, lead time.
And I'd like just to clarify really quick, they're not, I mean, same-sex men here, but a gestational carrier is someone who carries the child, not necessarily the same person that created the egg. In fact, legally, it's better if it's not. Because that woman has less of a hold to that egg if it's not her own. However, surrogacy is where, I mean, it's obviously, but like the whole thing is one person, but it's a little bit more legally difficult to sever those rights.
And that was sort of the
Unless it's.
illusion I had earlier, but I didn't, but think that's a great clarification point, because I have friends who, are their second child, and their process was, identifying someone in Florida who donated the egg, and the carrier was in Texas, right? And that was the process for them, so they moved to Texas for their kids every time that happened. So understanding that, that's also part of the sort of protection.
It is, but it's also more expensive, right? You have to extract that egg, preserve it,
And then you have to get an appointment with an attorney. Most clinics will have you see a mental health professional, which isn't bad. They're not trying to exclude you. It should just be an educational experience, like what to think about boundary setting, stuff like that. So, and basically anybody using third party is often required to see it. So I wouldn't be offended by it, unless they are using it to exclude you. And that's different. Hopefully they're nobody's doing that. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts. It takes time to get all these appointments together. People have to do their work. Directed donor, that process, that can take like 6 weeks. Just to do all the paperwork and testing and scheduling.
Which is really fast, because they can do it that fast.
Yeah.
Most people, in most, like a regular fertility center, it becomes almost a 6-month long process.
And for an attorney, I'd say give them at least a month from the time you meet them to the time you sign. I mean, even though some of these contracts are pretty boilerplate at this point, it's really important to get the language right.
And be open about what you're doing and what you're interested in doing. The professionals can only help you as much as you're willing to share with them.
In conversations like this, we're throwing a lot of information out there, and we're stacking layers upon layers upon layers, because we started talking about assisted reproduction laboratory, and then the clinical side of things, and then we start talking about you have to have legal on top of that, and now we're talking about you have to have mental health care on top of that, and it's layers on layers, and it can be overwhelming, and the entire process is overwhelming for patients, absolutely. But both of our organizations have been doing this so long, and we've been streamlining the process, and we make it really as painless and as effortless as it can be on your end. That's not to say it's not going to be without its heartbreaks. It's not saying it's not going to be without its frustrations. But when you have well-organized and established centers that do this day in and day out, week after week, it really does help. I know a lot of people go to, women will go to their OBGYN for an artificial insemination and not see a reproductive endocrinologist, which is fine if that's your choice. There's choices all over the place. But when you go to a specialized center, I think, we streamline the process, we make it as easy as possible. And we have the resources to back up and just help support you, whereas another center like a OBGYN may not.
And you guys have come to us, by the way. Thank you for being here.
Yes.
And you guys treat us with respect and celebration, not just tolerance or acceptance. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And also, Matthew, that's an excellent point. And in Cryobio, we joke because we actually are close with this group in DC. It's Rainbow Families. It's an LGBTQ plus group. And the director there is just amazing. This guy named Darren Vance. And he always likes to say that Cryobio is like the boutique sperm bank.
Very bad.
Because there are those big banks out there. Yeah, very clean, very well merchandised. And we have a really great staff, a really knowledgeable staff, and a very friendly, approachable staff too. So that's.
And that's something I think you should mention is the HIV
Yeah.
in our community is pretty high. Sometimes people think that they are excluded because they have HIV, but there actually is a way to watch sperm. And that's a very legal term,
Yeah.
wash term, but there's a way to use term where maybe people thought there wasn't an opportunity. And I thought that was really interesting.
No question.
I love Rainbow families. Yeah. You guys,
We work with them.
no, we do it. Yeah, do you, I'm sorry, what family do you guys provide surrogates or like the connection with surrogates?
We don't, no.
BYOS.
Where? For families that are in River. Where did they go?
Craigslist.
There's a bunch of surrogacy agencies. You could use one of them. You could find an attorney. Some attorneys have surrogacy agencies. Do you guys have surrogacy?
So we actually are starting one,
Okay.
you know, which I'm happy that we're starting one. I'd like to find ways to sort of lessen the cost because the problem, and you know, nothing, I think it's great that we have surrogacy agencies. But they basically act as brokers.
Yeah.
And I find actually probably 2/3 of the surrogacy or gestational carrier cycles I do are with people who found their own gestational carrier. And even though, you know, I was joking about Craigslist because Craigslist was great maybe up until 3 or 4 years ago. I still use this.
Don't worry for us.
Try to sell my. No, but there's actually there's Facebook groups where people find others, right? There's natural message boards.
Exactly, that is their biggest barrier.
Yes,
So you support them in just trying to brainstorm that.
yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, when you use a gestational carrier, you're gonna have a relationship with that person because it's not anonymous, right? And the more you get to know that person before you officially select them is not a bad idea. So just remotely meeting someone halfway across the country on Facebook and saying, you're the one, maybe that's a start, but you know, there's some tests involved and maybe at the personal level meeting them. There's actually a couple of apps in the works, like literally like phone apps that are gonna be essentially meeting apps for people interested in surrogacy. And I think that would be fantastic because it would hopefully take that massive fee that some of the agencies cost maybe out of it. You know, not to offend anyone who owns an agency or anything like that, but I think that we really have created in many ways, and Matt mentioned layers, there's so many layers for people to go through, specifically if you're 2 gay men. I mean, you have to have ridiculous amounts of money to even do it the way it's set up now, unless you just happen to know who's going to be your donor, happen who's going to be your carrier, right? So there's something internationally known as men having babies. It's a major circuit all around the world, specifically in Europe. I have several friends who are part of it, but it's ridiculously expensive and it caters to the wealthy, mainly in Europe, who don't have access to the facilities over there. And they're willing to pay whatever it takes to come to the US, whether it's to LA or Oregon or other you know, fertility centers around the country. And that serves that population, but then what about everybody else, right? So we need to find ways to make that a little bit better, and it's because it's not. It's frankly it's unfair if you're asking someone to put aside 6+ figures to have a baby.
You pay to play. Fortunately, 2 men tend to have the most, so. In this economy.
Bring us like thinking about.
Not being unfair, you have many dollars.
I mean, they can donate sperm to Cryobio and get paid, and after the course of whatever period of time. That's not, it's not anything.
As well. So we are considering using donor sperm, and there is a very vocal community of donor conceived children and adults now. And I'm wondering like what sort of considerations we should take into and think about when, I don't know, raising our child who is a donor conceived child.
So it's interesting, and I'm not going to speak from a donor conceived child perspective, but I am going to speak from the perspective of a child who didn't grow up with a father in their space, and I think it's something that we contextually need to think about as parental units in relation to identity and how people are growing up because of the way that the external world is putting that pressure on young people. So my daughter the other day said, I don't have a mom. And it was like, well, let's talk about what that means, let's break it down. Because I know that for her, that identity, seeing this representation of self around the house may be something that she considers, because it's something I struggled with, right? And as a 5 and 6 year old, I was like, well, there's no dad around. And what does that mean? And where's this dude that's supposed to look like me or whatever it is, right? And so I think I think as we're in these spaces, we need to be able to have these open conversations. And then I think what happens is that our young people may want to explore what that parental donor or what was like. And I think that's another space where we need to be prepared to have those things. And you know, whether it's a closed process or an open process, you know, the person on the other side has to be prepared and ready to receive whatever's coming down the pipe. So I know there's a lot of personal conversation that I think our families have to prepare ourselves for. I know I'm thinking about that with my partner, where my daughter may one day wake up and say, okay, well, I want to engage with who this person is. And we have already started sort of in these spaces now having small conversations, say, you may not have a mommy as defined, but you have a mother, right? There was someone who donated this, or a person who donated this, and this is what it is. And so I don't know. I think it becomes this deeply sort of interpersonal thing where you're having these conversations with self, prepare yourself to support whatever exploration and journey we know this person may or may not go on. I know there are probably a lot of young folks who go to this point of saying, well, I don't really care. Right, there may be some who say, I don't really care who this donor was, because, and hopefully, in my heart, that's where I think we all move to, because as a society, we should be saying, love who is there and love who is giving you love and receive that in that way. But I know that there are also young people out there who just say, I don't really have any question or concern about who that person was in that process. So I don't know, that's just a lot of words.
And there's a lot of legal framework. Oh, not to jump in here, but like, when you're writing that donor agreement or that surrogacy agreement, you explicitly say whether or not there will be contact, and that it's explicitly up to the parents about whether or not there will be any discussion. Or anything that you would like, if you come with a friend and want them to be active, or vice versa. That's the point where you lay out, this is the framework if our child acts. But in this world, I mean, it's a Google search.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Well, I was gonna say, you know, one of the things, finding networks of families who've gone through the experience, I think is probably gonna be the most helpful. You know, to be able to share that experience, because I mean, it's not textbook, right? You did this, not regardless of who writes it down on a piece of paper, it's not gonna be the same for everyone.
Right.
And that journey to self-identity, as we all hopefully know, is such a crazy one. So we never know what's gonna happen. But I think finding families and experiences that have something that can be central to that. And I don't know, maybe there are networks already out there. I don't know if you all know.
The family project.
And then all there.
And Gates can also have some referrals that maybe would have connections. And other families who have built their family.
I think it's great you're thinking about it. I think that shows a lot that you're already thinking about it. The field originally was very secretive. It's changed a ton. So a lot of the donor conceived people now, the way donor sperm was then is totally different than it is now. There's been a lot of emphasis on really educating both the donors and the recipients. And I think one of the biggest things to come out of that is don't keep it a secret from your kids. Like, start telling them, just make it part of their story. And then it's like not really a big deal. We have switched from, we used to have anonymous donors where we would, you know, not share any information. We've moved away from that. We're not adding any more anonymous donors. There's different levels of information release. But that information release is going to belong to the child. It doesn't belong to the parents. It's not until the child turns 18. If you're going through a bank. I think you don't know what your child's going to want, right? Like, you might think you have all these hopes and plans, and then your child comes out and they're their own person. And at first they might not care at all, and then they might care, and then they won't care again. And who knows? You just don't know. I think as long as you are open with them, talk to them about it, the better it's gonna be. And who knows where we're gonna be in like 18 years, 20 years.
Preach, older, greater, right here.
Yeah. But it's wonderful. And I think, there's a lot of really negative stories out there right now.
Yeah.
Don't let that like dissuade you from doing this. You know, your kid's gonna be your kid. You're gonna raise your child. You know, personally, that's gonna affect who your kid is, you know, like who raised them. You're gonna be such a bigger impact on them than the genetics they're getting from a donor. So.
That makes sense. There is a very vocal community. There's some negativity there as well, and I'm trying to be mindful of our wants and needs, and then also future wants and needs of potential child. So, yeah.
Well, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think your needs are important too.
Robin, it's like the.
They are. I mean, I think that can get lost in this a lot. I mean, you're definitely creating a child, so they matter, but you matter as well. So do what you're comfortable with. Support your child with it. And that's what I was going there. Yeah, do that.
What were you gonna say, Bill?
I just think the whole thing is like shifting so quickly right now. You had donor sibling registry, which is still very popular, but it started out as a sort of a negative push towards the sperm banks, the fertility centers and things like that. And then I think what's happened is a lot of the kids they're doing their own thing, and they're finding other kids that might have gone through donor sperm. Eventually they even find some that use the same donor possibly and stuff. And that's really cool. So, and the other thing is, from an old guy's point of view, a lot of times the people that flood the internet, is that the right term these days?
Yeah.
And are so opinionated, are opinionated because for some reason they have a negative agenda. There's a few people out there that will get on and go, oh, this was just so wonderful, my kid's so great, blah, blah, blah. But the person that really sticks with it and floods too much information, I just think have been negative people that for some reason or other didn't have a good experience. And they probably don't have a good experience with many things in their life either, so. Right. Sorry, Hannah, but
The secrecy is. I think the people now that found out when they're older, the secrecy has been the problem. I don't think the fact that their parents with donor sperm was the problem. I think it was that
Not knowing
Also
until
there.
they're
Yes.
25.
70.
71.
But I would encourage you to, I hope your question was answered sufficiently. I would encourage you to, as you begin this journey, if you have any questions like that, just to call us and say, hey, my name is blah, blah, blah. Is that this event with you guys? I have some questions, and we will absolutely walk you through the process, answer any other questions you have, and make ourselves available to you throughout the entire process.
Come in and sit down.
Encourage that. Yeah, that's it as well. Yes.
So as we wind down this session, I think sort of what I'm hearing, to summarize a couple of things, I think the three things is to, one, really think about the cost, right? Being thoughtful and intentional about what that is going to be for you. To consider the agency of the partners that you're working with and how they're prepared, but how you're prepared to engage with them. And a lawyer. Make sure you got a lawyer. And I think that's part of the conversation as well, to make sure that is a part of consideration. And I think the way that I wrap that all up in sort of a little thing here is time.
Yeah.
Right, it's really take the time to do the work, to identify all the things that are right for you in this process that can be costly.
Or go have a one night stand with a heterosexual.
Well.
Yeah, I don't know, do you guys have any experience with maybe reciprocal IVF with a trans male partner? I don't know if being on testosterone for long periods of time has any effect on that process. Yeah. So I mean, like he's been on testosterone for 6 years. I don't know if that's gonna affect that process. How long would he have to pause that? To position for the option?
Good question. So testosterone is necessary for sperm production. So after you are on it for a while, we do see a decline in sperm quantity.
Oh,
No, I have
so.
Yeah.
Take one of his eggs.
Yes, absolutely. And that's your there.
No, that's a great question. So there is some data on this. And I can tell you, I have never actually successfully been able to start the process in a situation like yours because so much goes into it. And mainly because most couples are pretty averse to reversing those testosterone effects. So testosterone can have a negative effect on egg quality. And the thought is that the theory is that anything we do today to help or hurt the eggs really can affect us for the next 90 days. So coming off T to hopefully alleviate some of that, that can be hard for a lot of people. You know, that being said, I've never actually just said, just screw it, just start them and see whatever happens, because there's so much at stake, right? No one's wanting to be that guinea pig. So, you know, I think it's funny, I'm going to a session next weekend in LA. It's the American Society of Reproductive Medicine. There's actually a session there specifically on this that I wanted to attend. Because it is something that we're seeing more and more of, but it's also something that's, you know, more there's a lot involved. So coming off it, because you've worked so hard to get to this point, right? And then you will see some changes in you during that time. A lot of people just don't want to undergo that. But if you're
Hard pass. Yeah, they asked me at the beginning of transitioning if you want to freeze some eggies, and I was like, eggies, I don't have any money for that, it's expensive, so.
Yeah.
And then I guess maybe like a second part, if he just signs the birth certificate.
Can't, if I'm legally allowed to sign a birth certificate? So, because if my wife has a baby and I'm in the room.
So
who's
yeah,
gonna-
we call that marital presumption.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is, again, a very bureaucratically efficient thing that says if a man and a woman have a child and they're married, then it's the man's child because all women are faithful. Sign here.
Yeah.
Again, this is a rebuttable presumption. Yeah. Knock yourself out. Feel free, come see me after it doesn't work and you just let me know. Because that's the thing, you're just kind of like, well, what if I said my name was Envigo Montoya? You know, like, go for it. But if it doesn't work out, Jimothy, come back. Yes, my dog. Is it really Timothy?
His name's Romeo Jimothy. That's so funny.
It does seem and sound like it probably should be a conversation. I mean, you're going somewhere and sort of possibly staying in touch. Seems like a really valuable.
I love that.
I'm glad we made that connection.
Come to the next
For you today. So, you know, I think as we wrap up this particular section, you know, again, I want to start off end by saying how it started. Thank you all for the length of time that you've been doing this work that predates some of us in this room. And
got a lot of Christmas cards.
and
Cookies, I just like cookies, just send it.
hopefully we'll continue to be able to partner with you all in this work moving forward. And if anyone here or who gets to watch this later needs to get in touch with you all, we will make sure that we have more information for folks. But thank you all so much for spending the morning with us.
Thank you so much.